Χριστός Ανέστη.
Αληθώς Ανέστη.
Χριστός Ανέστη.
Αληθώς Ανέστη.
Χριστός Ανέστη.
Αληθώς Ανέστη.
Χριστός Ανέστη εκ νεκρών θανάτων πατήσας και κτίσεν της μνήμας ζωήν χαρισάμενος. Αληθώς Ανέστη ο Κύριος. Please be seated. Dear friends, today is the first Sunday after Easter, and in most European languages, other than the Germanic languages, there is another word for Easter. Easter is a Germanic word relating to the East. For all the Romance languages, so anything south of Britain and Germany, so for French, Spanish, Italian, we would be using a word that relates to Pascha. Same with Greece, same with all the Eastern Europeans. Pascha, the Hebrew word for Passover, rendered into the Greek as Pascha. And Pascha means the passage or the Passover. Originally and historically, the Passover from Egypt into the Holy Land through the Red Sea for the Jews. But for the rest of the nations of the world who have embraced Christianity, for us, Pascha has to do with the passing over from this life to the next, this life which is entirely driven by the cycle of biological life, birth, growth, withering away, and then death, to a life which is eternal, everlasting, and blissful. But do we wait until that time? Does Pascha only apply to what is beyond the grave? Not only. Because Pascha is experienced now. Pascha as the passage from, as I said, death to life, from sin to life, and the acquisition of true freedom, spiritual freedom, from what we call the passions, those behaviors and things in here and in here that enslave us, the material life. As such, we can experience and benefit and enjoy that now. We speak of slavery. And slavery is not just what we historically know slavery to be, human beings being owned by other human beings. And as we move forward into the future, this is less and less of a reality in our lives. It's not a reality in our lives, in Australia or in other, let's call them first world countries. But slavery still exists today in many other countries, unfortunately. We speak of liberty from the slavery of the passions. And we talk about this in a spiritual way, in a metaphorical way, and a figurative way, and apply it to many chapters in our life and many examples in our life. Let's look a little bit at St. George. 23rd of April today, It's been a long time since St. George Day has fallen on a Sunday and after Easter, and we can celebrate St. George fully. Let's talk a little bit about St. George and his example. A young man, 20-something years old, born in Cappadocia around the end of the 3rd century AD. He became a soldier, he signed up in the Roman army, and he quickly ascended the ranks and became an officer. The Emperor Diocletian decides that Christianity is a problem in his empire, and he begins by banning Christians from having any positions in public service. So that meant government. No Christians were allowed to be in government, and that also meant that no Christians could be part of the military. And the punishment or penalty for dodging the rule, i.e. keeping your position and not saying, hey, I resign, I'm a Christian, was that you would be faced with capital punishment, execution. Many people simply resigned. Many Christians. But some Christians, and there is this multitude of Christians from this specific era, from about 300 AD all the way to about 310 AD, there aren't just 2 or 3 martyrs from this era. There are thousands of martyrs from this era. St. George is one of them, one of the most famous ones. St. George was an officer, and he had the courage to say, I disagree. This is wrong. We are not a threat to the empire. We are not a threat to your country. We are fighting for your country. I'm in the army. We serve our fellow human being through public service. And he spoke up. By this stage, he was stationed in Nicomedia. Nicomedia is in Asia Minor, very close to Constantinople on the eastern side of the Bosporus. Ultimately, he was given a chance to renounce his Christianity. And it's interesting, you know, these days, 2023, I see it on social media. Many young Greek people are renouncing their Christianity and saying, I'm going back to the worship of Zeus and Aphrodite and the ancient gods. And it's not that popular, but it's there. 20 years ago, this didn't exist. But we have this tragedy where young Greek people, entirely taken by a certain narrative, a nationalistic one, I would say, that my religion is not about what's right, which is the correct religion or the religion that persuades me. My religion should be Greek religion. So the criterion by which they choose to go backwards is because it's Greek, not because it's right or better. Because if they were to look at history, exactly in this era, the 200s, the 300s, the 400s, our ancestors who were worshippers of Zeus, Aphrodite, and the Olympian gods made a decision based on other criteria. And the young people of today who take that path don't actually even consider this, that our ancestors who were pagans, who were worshippers of Zeus, in this case with Diocletian, Jupiter, chose Christianity because they considered Christianity better. They considered it a higher way of living. There's 2 or 3 examples which are a theme in this time, and in the writings of the Greeks who became Christian of that time and gave their reasons, and those writings survive, have very strong reasons. Aside from the philosophical convincing, they were convinced by its philosophy and its theology and its truthfulness. There was a moral side as well. And the moral side was that the pagan prevailing religion, the Greco-Roman religion, was one where all sorts of immoral things were happening. And Christianity offered an alternative, a better, cleaner alternative. I know there are children among us, so I'll try and say this nicely. But in ancient Greece, pederasty was not only accepted, it was lauded, praised, poems written about it, art depicting it. What a great thing. What a great thing for society. Our ancestors saw this. They knew what their grandparents or even themselves were engaged in. Once Christianity said there's a better way, they said that is indeed something I don't want in my life. One example. The other one is the acceptance of slavery as normal. Slavery. You own another human being. You abuse another human being. Perfectly okay. Another human being becomes your property. And you don't even treat them like humans necessarily. That was slavery. Perfectly legal and secured and protected by the law of ancient Greece and ancient Rome. A third example is the treatment of women and children in the Greco-Roman way and law, where invariably the women and the children of a family belong to the man. Now you might think every old culture thought the same thing. It's one thing to think belongs to the man, and another in the legal system saying you are his property and you do not have the right to divorce. The Greeks were a bit softer on this. It was only in the Christian era, in the 500 AD, when the Emperor Justinian, a Christian himself, instituted in the Roman law for the first time that women had an equal right to divorce and an equal right to property as men, and that children were no longer property, as in like a house or money, of the father of the household. That was a Christian Roman law. Let's go back to St. George. As far as we're concerned, St. George sets a wonderful example. He could have just fit in. He could have just closed his mouth, pretended to be pagan, pretended to worship Jupiter and Venus and so on, and got away with it. But no, he stood up for what was right. And that's the example that we like to present for our subsequent generations. My prayer, brothers and sisters, today is that we combine this notion of Passover and passage from a way of decay or darkness to a way of light and life through Jesus Christ, following the examples of saints such as St. George, the great trophy bearer and martyr. And as patron saint of our church, I thank you for coming to honour him and show your respects to St. George.